we basically have the birth of a new asset class of treatments in medicine. So if you think about what the COVID pandemic has led to, a silver lining of the pandemic is mRNA-based vaccines are now have a lot more investment in them, have a lot more regulatory interest in them for approval, and of course a lot more research and kind of real-world experience behind them. So suddenly you can take this technology, which has been around since the 90s, but didn't really have a ton of money or regulatory support, now has a ton of money and some regulatory support, and you can see the wheels turning of different pharmaceutical companies in terms of how do we take this new technology and apply it to different diseases and ailments. So right now, there's a few in trial phase, which are super interesting. They're developing an mRNA-based vaccine to potentially address the flu. Uh, Flu shots are historically not very effective, only about a 50% efficacy rate. If you can raise that to 90 or beyond, you could essentially eliminate the flu from all of our winters, which of course would be very exciting. On top of that, though, they're looking at mRNA-based vaccines for HIV, potentially for treating multiple sclerosis or even cancers. So a lot of different ways to use this technology. The pipeline of medical breakthroughs can take a lot of time. Can
Yeah.
take over 10 years. But we're seeing, a lot of these technologies now being applied in late stage trials. The exciting thing will be if the trials do well, if we get expedited FDA approval, then you could see these ideas going from kind of a research phase to being really commercialized and generating a lot of revenue. Um, One example of an area where it's really on the cusp of kind of full FDA approval is a drug to treat Alzheimer's. And it's been about 20 years since we've seen a meaningful drug come out to treat Alzheimer's, but with the latest advancements, with latest drug trials and some successes in there, and more FDA interest in these drugs, um, we could see really a full approval later this year for potentially groundbreaking drug. So that gets us really excited about the pipeline of medical innovations right now.
Mhm. Why do you think it's all happening now? What's led to the? Because it's been a while since I think, but since there's been some huge advancements here, and I mean, I've heard a lot of people keep on talking about it. It feels like the next 10 years is going to be big. So I'm just trying to understand why it's all coming together now.
There's a lot of different factors coming together. The first one, I would say, let's go back to the pandemic. It really created room for something like mRNA-based vaccines to be getting invested in and getting approvals. On top of that, you just have a ton of data. So there's a lot more genetic data that's being collected, and the reason for that is that we've had falling costs for doing genetic testing. The very first, human genome project was billions of dollars. Now it costs $100, $200 to get genetic tested. So there's a lot, because the prices have come down, there's a lot more collection of genetic data and a lot more analysis of that genetic data. So suddenly you can be looking at the efficacy of drugs not on very basic markers of gender and age and family history, but really looking at a genetic level of why did this drug work on this person and not that person. That allows for incredible, much more precise advancements, in the medical field.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you have technological advancements, you have more data, you have falling costs, and frankly, we see kind of a population trend as well. You have aging populations around the world that are getting older, that are living longer in retirement, and they're facing a lot of advanced age-related diseases that, frankly, people didn't really face 100 years ago because they weren't living long enough. So Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cancers, a lot of these ailments have been around for a while, but just haven't affected as much of the population. Now that we see aging populations in the US and Europe and Asia, there's a lot more demand for these types of drugs
Yeah.
as well.
And do you think the market is underestimating the potential of this theme at the moment? And if so, why?
Yeah, we think so. I mean, look, in the individual sense, a lot of these things are binary, whether a drug is successful or not,
Yeah.
or whether it's approved or not. But when you look at it at the aggregate level of several, dozens of companies across the neuroscience space looking for advancements in Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or beyond, you can start to see the trend of, first of all, this group has been heavily hurt by 2022 with the sell-off in growth stocks. A lot of these companies have sold off significantly, but at the same time, in the aggregate, they're closer to more medical breakthroughs. breakthroughs. So, we get excited that valuations have gone down and kind of the closeness of a new breakthrough
Yeah.
has accelerated. So you combine those two together, and I think the market absolutely has kind of lost a little bit of interest, and that creates opportunities for investors.